When Dawn's father dies, she loses everything, her home, her family, and the sister who never really cared about her. Kicked out with nothing but her belongings and an old watch, she thinks it's over. But her father had foreseen it all. And in his final gift lies a secret that will change everything. I always knew my sister Charlotte didn't care about me. But I never thought she'd throw me out on the street 2 weeks after our father's funeral. For as long as I can remember, there were 3 of us, Dad, Charlotte and me. Basically, of course, just Dad and me. Charlotte, 35, was never really part of this family. She lived in our house, but it wasn't her home. She was always out, at a party, with friends, looking for a big future, as she always said. "I'll be cool, Dawn," she said. "I deserve more than this little life where no one knows who I am. Maybe you'll figure that out someday." She treated our house like a hotel, showing up only when she needed something, especially when she had no money. On the other hand, I was 17 and I knew nothing but this house. I always looked after my dad, helped him around the house, cooked dinner when he came home from work. "Home-cooked food is the best, Dawn," he said. "No matter how tired you are, always find time to cook something. What if it's just noodles from a bag?" I asked. The only thing I remember about that conversation is how my father looked at me and laughed. Growing up, I always thought Charlotte was jealous of me. She was 18 when I was born. A grown-up, with a full life ahead of her. And I was just a child who came after. I was a surprise that my mom didn't even stick around for. But my dad? He adored me. "Dawn, you were the dawn of a new beginning, my dear," he said. "You were the biggest surprise of my life, and I welcomed you with an open heart." Maybe this explains Charlotte's behavior. When I could understand her, she became more and more distant. She didn't see me as a sister, not really. To her, I was just an obstacle in her life, a child who shouldn't be there. She never read to me at night or played with me. When Dad took us out for ice cream, she barely looked up from her phone. But I still, somehow, thought she cared about me. That she will be there when it really matters. But I was wrong. And then, Dad left. And my whole life collapsed. 2 weeks after the funeral, we were sitting in the lawyer's office. Charlotte was dressed nicely, but she didn't look like she cared. She was just bored. Checking her nails while we waited for Dad's will to be read. And I sat next to her, my hands clasped in my lap. I didn't know what to think or feel except that I was drowning in grief. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ladies," he said. "I had to take a call. Let's get back to business." Charlotte finally looked up. "The house goes to Charlotte," he said. My heart sank. I wasn't going to argue with that, but why? Why did Dad do this to me? "As for you," the lawyer turned to me, "your father left you this." He handed me a small box. I knew what was in it before I even opened it. It was Dad's watch. They were old, scratched and barely working. But as far as I remember, I always saw them on my father's wrist. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Charlotte snorted. "Seriously? His watch?" she said mockingly. "God, even after death, Dad still has his preferences." I ignored her. My fingers slid over the leather strap of my watch. I smelled my dad. I didn't care about the house. I didn't care about the stuff. I just wanted my dad back. How will I study at university without him? The next few days we still lived under the same roof. We hardly talked. I went to school. After school I worked in a cafe. I returned home. It was a routine, and I loved it. I clung to it like a last resort. Because without her I would drown in grief. One evening, when I returned from work, I found all my things packed at the door, including my guitar. Charlotte stood in the hallway with her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "There," she said happily. "We're going our separate ways, Dawn. I need you to go." "What?" I blinked slowly, as if I was in a bad dream and trying to wake up. "You heard me, sis," she said, gesturing toward my bags. "This house is mine now. You heard it from the lawyer. And I don't want to be your babysitter anymore." I found it hard to breathe. It felt like all my organs were slowly failing. "Charlotte," I said. "I have no other place. And it's not my problem," she said cheerfully. "You have to decide that yourself." I felt my eyes start to burn, but I refused to cry in front of her. "Are you really doing this? To me?" I whispered, holding back tears. She smiled. "You should have been nicer to me when we were growing up, sis," she said. "Maybe then I would have felt guilty." I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called our lawyer. When he answered, I told him everything. "Dawn," he said, surprised. "How can I help?" "Charlotte kicked me out of the house." I said. "What should I do?" There was a pause. And then he laughed. "Really, sincerely. I can't believe it," he said. "It's just like your father predicted. Come see me tomorrow. I have something for you." What could he have prepared for me? "I'll book you a motel for the night," he said. "Or a guest house. Wait 10 minutes, I'll send a car with the address." "Thank you," I replied. I sat under the porch and waited for his message. When the car arrived, I got in and drove to a small and cute guest house. "Here you go, ma'am," the driver said as he carried out my bags. How did I end up here? How did it all fall apart so quickly? I had just started unpacking my pajamas when the hostess came to my room. "Dawn?" she asked. "Matthew asked me to bring dinner. I have macaroni and cheese and a salad." I couldn't believe my luck with my lawyer. I didn't know him well, but at least he cared about me. I hardly slept that night. The next morning, I staggered into Matthew's office, exhausted and speechless. He greeted me with a warm smile. "Sit down, little one," he said. "You're going to want to sit up for this." I sank into the chair. "What's happening?" He slid the folder across the table. "Your dad was a smart man, Dawn," he said. "He knew Charlotte would probably throw you out once she took control of the house. Did you know?" I felt myself twitch. "That's why he asked me to prepare this document," he said. Matthew opened the folder, showing me a whole bunch of documents. 7 years ago, your father inherited a huge sum of money. And this sum, it was bequeathed to you. Thanks for watching. Write comments what you think about the actions of the characters in the story and follow our channel.